We left off with an attempt to thwart Thanos by swiping the Infinity Gauntlet away when he wasn't aware of the Silver Surfer's threat. We thus continue in the pages of Silver Surfer 57, when Thanos makes his displeasure at this known. However, as I discussed previously, Thanos is not one inclined towards brute force. He doesn't lose his temper and blast as those who understand him less would presume. He is someone who has calculated his way into omnipotence. Thus his response is not blasting the Silver Surfer to bits, but something else entirely. Reality becomes distorted around him, and he is then dropped without his board onto some floating construct before a pair of doors, which addresses him through the knockers. Inside, he finds a bald man smoking a cigarette, a Rorschach test on the wall like artwork. This strange man calls himself Virtual Reality, and says this is the Hall of Absolutes. He knows a great deal, like that Thanos demonstrates such seeming narcissism on the outside, but implies that this is all surface and not what's underneath. Virtual Reality tells the surfer he's passed through the doors of perception, and the only way to leave is forward. It's a storehouse for all the truths, half-truths, and lies, where those who come often fail to find the courage to confront reality, yet those who face their fears become trapped by them. Thanos chose to send the Silver Surfer here as punishment, to destroy his enemy not with enraged energy, but through the erosion of the soul itself. He starts by showing the surfer's strongest memory from his childhood, his mother dead in the bath by her own hand. The suicide discussed in Silver Surfer 50, when Thanos forced him to reveal his regret. Here we see that on Zen-La, the custom was if a child is grieving, they're given a playmate to be a companion to assuage the pain. The one that young Norn was paired with was Shala-Bal, only he rejected her. The surfer defends his child self by pointing out he was just a grieving child back then. But then, when both grief and childhood are past, still Norn keeps Shala-Bal at arm's length, committed more to his scientific pursuits than to her. When he tries to defend himself by saying that he had to see to other things that were more important, it puts his egocentrism in perspective. After his father's suicide, Shala-Bal was nevertheless still there for him, through all the bad times that came. Yet when Galactus came and he gave himself over to become the Herald, he rejected Shala-Bal's plea to bring her along, and then proceeded to lead Galactus to worlds, inhabited worlds in many cases, and just stand there while they were annihilated. The surfer naturally pleads that he'd been tampered with, and that he devotes himself to protecting innocence now. But as discussed over on Part 10 of Incredible, the surfer had the chance to protect innocence with the Defenders, yet soon departed. And then there's Mantis and Nova, lovers that he has likewise left behind. And repeated images of him bested by Thanos, before his godhood, after his godhood, and even as an animated statue. Again, the Silver Surfer was the one who could have stopped Thanos before he became a universal threat, and he failed. The surfer complains about these choices of events and images that he's being shown, but Virtual Reality states he's not choosing them. These are the things that preoccupy the surfer's mind. And there's nothing more to show. In his self-image, the Silver Surfer sees a life of him responding to abandonment by abandoning others, and in the end, leading to ultimate failure. He closes out the issue alone in the dark. Issue 58 opens with Virtual Reality finally illuminating the darkness by lighting a cigarette. The Silver Surfer asks to be released from here, that he's relived all of his failures now, he's been suitably shamed, now he'd like to go, please. Virtual Reality says that's down to him. The surfer can find his way out, or simply embrace the darkness. It's easy to understand the Silver Surfer's despair. As we have recently repeatedly seen, he possesses such power, but power can only solve immediate things, simple things. Sure, he could topple the corrupt leadership of Dynamo City, but he would kill the innocent in the process. He can lock away captive animals so none, including themselves, get harmed, but he cannot solve their plight. Power alone cannot bring justice. Yet if he does nothing, that only justifies all his self-recriminations. So he blasts his way free of where he is contained and searches for the way out. Finally, he's led to where the Hulk, Doctor Strange, and Namor wait to confront him, attacking him with fists and with words that there is far too much shame to ever forgive. This is what gives these three the power over him: denial, doubt, and guilt. In the face of his accusers, he says he just wants to forget, just to have these all go away. But that's the point. You can't just pretend something is not there forever. He's chained in place, a plaything of the trio forever, unless he can find the way out. Which then begins. His mother arrives to help him understand her suicide was not his fault. It was just her choice, and she unlocks one of his bindings. His father comes as well, saying Norrin's rejection was his own fault. He'd raised his son in his own image. How could Norrin have reacted in any other way? He unlocks one as well. Shalabal arrives, and he admits that he ran away from her, and she forgives him because she knows he wasn't ready to be the man she wanted him to be. Mantis and Nova forgive as well, knowing he had not yet found the emotional maturity to cope with such complications. Finally, he must do more than just provide the lip service of, "I atone for my past wrongs by protecting the innocent." He must forgive himself for his past, not pretend it wasn't there. Forgiveness requires facing the past, acknowledging his failure, choosing to live with the memory of failure, but so that he can let that failure inform the need to do right for those who paid when he did wrong. Forgiveness isn't forgetting the past. It's making you remember, but giving you a way to live with it. He returns to the Hall of Absolutes, which looks different to him, because he is seeing it through different eyes now. The surfer is able to return to proper reality, and is bored, and heads to Warlock to pilot the next stage of their opposition to Thanos, which will continue in Doctor Strange 34. Snow is already falling, in August, as Rintrah returns with Pip's beer in time to see Doctor Strange, aided by Clea and Dr. Druid, casting a spell to draw the Scarlet Witch here. Thanos had rebounded her magic back onto herself, but they've just interceded to pull her away at the last moment. Without the knowledge that the gems provide him, Thanos had no way of knowing it was a deception. She'd been brought here not just because they're trying to save who they can, but her own magic can help with their efforts. She was trained under Agatha Harkness, who was unavailable, whisked away by the snap. They have the shards of glass that was once Thor, and also Doctor Doom's body. She and Clea will need to go over Thor's shards, while Strange and Druid work on helping Doctor Doom. Well, Rintrah is annoyed at being sidelined, I should add. But we see why, as Strange admits they're going to Tibet because the three of them all have history with the magics there. You remember we covered in our last part how Dr. Druid was a trial run for the Ancient One to prepare the way for when Stephen Strange would arrive? While Dr. Doom wasn't tied to the Ancient One, he did come here, but to hide his disfigured face. An ancient order of monks found him half frozen to death, and he absorbed so much of their wisdom that eventually he went from the student to the master. They forged his original armor and mask. Now it's hoped the monks can help, returning him to the flames that had birthed Doctor Doom in the first place, to reverse what Thanos did to him. But as they do, Strange and Druid need to head outside to deal with arriving Chinese soldiers. They've come to force the monks to use their magic to reverse this ice age. Besides having killed one of the monks, and not to downplay murder obviously, but being out here stopping them from shooting anyone else means that Doctor Strange isn't inside, helping guide the ritual to save Doctor Doom, whose extra power might be what is needed to turn defeat to victory. In other words, these soldiers may have doomed the entire universe. Jerks. Sure enough, by the time Doctor Strange has them in mystic bonds, something in Doctor Doom's form has appeared, but not looking like the man they know. This is his shadow self, every feeling and urge that he's repressed. But if Doctor Doom is a bad guy, then Dr. Druid figures this shadow self must be a good guy. But it doesn't matter, the shadow is stopping them, And ironically, we may need to defeat the good one because the world needs a guy who is named Doom to actually avoid being doomed. Doctor Strange is trying to stop the Shadow from destroying Doom's body, while Dr. Druid creates a protective circle to buy time. Time that Dr. Doom uses to rise again. The three together oppose the Shadow and drive it back inside of Doom. As Strange notes, it's not so clear-cut as good and evil with that guy. For instance, the act of trying to take the gauntlet, Dr. Doom confesses it was a momentary loss of control, that he knows the stakes and was trying to thwart Thanos. It was just a moment's temptation that he will not give in to a second time. It's implied that this situation has actually humbled Doom a little. If he truly, truly believed he had done the right thing, that he deserves this power, he wouldn't lie about it. To confess that his will had a crack. Doom's ego would never allow him to admit that unless he realized the damage that it had done, and all the more reason to ensure he didn't allow it to happen again. We continue now over in the Incredible Hulk 384, which was an interesting problem in isolation. While the Silver Surfer book, as I mentioned in the last part, was being padded out so that the issues matched up with what was transpiring in Infinity Gauntlet, Peter David had too much going on for that. He'd just finished a major change to the title character in body and mind and in allegiances, hooking up with the Pantheon. He was happy to have his new Hulk play a more substantial role than many others in this event, but he couldn't afford to be too badly diverted from his own plans. It's for this reason that despite it being months before the Hulk was shrunk down in size battling Thanos, that he appears here in his shrunken form. After the fragments come together, the Hulk comes to standing on a ledge in the sewers, until he gets attacked by a giant rat. He kills it and then wonders how he'll escape this alien world, only to see giant bits of Earth garbage go by to confirm which planet he's actually on. He soon spots a figure coming, except they can't hear him down here, which might be for the best because it's the Abomination, carrying Nadia, his love, we saw in issue 383. The Hulk tries attacking, screws up his trajectory on account of his size, and lands in the sewage, and then gets stepped on. That damage to his dignity, he follows to where the Abomination parks himself, a homeless enclave. Nadia awakens, horrified, but the Abomination figures he's done her a favor, saving her from the pandemonium on the streets above. It's clear he still loves her, even as he makes some social commentary about things, but then Abomination hears a voice telling him to let her go. It's the Hulk, claiming to be God. Abomination doesn't buy it, but when Hulk responds to a question for proof of his divinity and gets a smiting for it, he's inclined to now listen. The Hulk tells him the only thing to do is set her free. To keep her down here is to kill her. And while, yes, there is a chance that a fairy tale ending will mean that she embraces the monster Emil Blonsky has now become, it's more likely the Abomination would kill the memory that Blonsky once was. Now, whatever romantics say, there is a limit to how blind love can be. The Abomination's words about being turned into a monster and rejected by his love hits Hulk harder than he'd like to admit. And yes, Abomination knows who he's been talking to, but that could be the reason why he listens. There's no one else who could know this unique pain. With that, a portal appears and the Hulk dives in, leading us back to Doctor Strange for issue 35. We see the portal the Hulk went into was again created by Doctor Strange, and the Hulk lands on a rock floating in this particular dimension and restored to normal size. The Hulk is spoiling to get back into the fray, but Warlock wants everyone on standby somewhere, and Strange has apparently picked this place. What are friends for? Then again, Rintrah gets snubbed on Doctor Strange's return, who ignores his greeting to get right on with the matter of Thor's shards. Scarlet Witch shares the suspicion some of the Avengers have that this bearded Thor isn't the one they knew as the son of Odin, that he might be, in her words, a stand-in for right now. To explain why there's no sense of an Asgardian aura coming off the shards of glass. Also, that perhaps they need to take the shards to the places of fire and ice from Norse legend. This time he'll take Clea and Scarlet Witch, and Rintrah can stay behind. Maybe he'll get lucky and get sent out for more beer. Pip says that maybe Rintrah should go looking for a new master to apprentice under, and Rintrah thinks he might be right. Doctor Strange just doesn't seem to have time to teach him, too busy running around saving the cosmos. Pip notices that the crystal ball was left on and recognizes Drax, who's still with Firelord. It's a chance for Rintrah to prove himself if he can get them back from the Cretaceous Age to join in the battle. As for the others, they arrive to find Cerberus, which they note should not be guarding anything Norse. Hela comes out. Seems that she misdirected them to find out what's going on with them. She took Cerberus off of Pluto just to humble him. She's happy to mess with Strange if he won't capitulate. When they explain, she says the shards both are and are not the Thunder God, and after a little tussling decides to let them continue on their way. Meanwhile, in a page right out of history, Drax and Firelord are fighting off a dinosaur attack when Pip and Rintrah drop out of the air onto them. Except the time hole closes up before they can head back the other way, and without the Orb of Agamotto, Rintrah can't make another one. Equally in trouble is Doctor Strange, who is trying to get the shards reforged, only the Frost Giants and Fire Trolls show up, and for once both those sides agree on something. It would be in their best interest if there was no longer a Thor around. Clea joins to try to help protect Doctor Strange, while the Scarlet Witch calls upon her limited magical knowledge, because her innate hex magic is activated through her mutant status, in other words, science, and doesn't work here. She manages to get the spell to work, and Thor appears, and with him here, there's really nothing left to fight over, and the elementals depart. Eric Masterson confesses his real identity, but for now, he's going to have to stay here until called upon. Doctor Doom, Thor, and the Hulk are a good start, but they need more raw power. Fortunately, Rintrah reaches out to Doctor Strange so he can rescue the four of them from the age of the dinosaurs, though he puts Firelord and Drax in the Netherworld with Thor to wait until summoned. As for Rintrah, Doctor Strange gives him an attaboy for his initiative and says he's going to become a master magician once this is over and they have time to really get down to further training. Which finally brings us to issue 5 of Infinity Gauntlet, where the Watcher stands there to watch the confrontation to come. In his previous attempts at godhood, heroes gathered to bring down Thanos. This time, cosmic beings ally against him on a scale unheard of. They command he surrender the gems, and Thanos commands them to depart before he becomes angry enough to smite them. As for Mephisto, he decides this is the moment to get in Eros' head, that when this starts, he and Nebula aren't going to last long. Too much power will be flying around. But don't worry, Thanos might bring him back, just as good as Nebula over there. As for the heroes, this is when Warlock asks Strange to start rounding up the fallen and the exiled for a later offensive. The power of the confrontation annihilates whole solar systems and kills billions, but Eros is not one of them. He and Nebula have been spared the ravages by Mistress Death herself. The Silver Surfer and Warlock are themselves caught in the blast and nearly killed, and then must escape the dimensional distortions that follow, and which reaches Earth, allowing a nihilist to come through and swarm into the Ice Age-ravaged world. Yet still Thanos stands his ground, protecting himself and the terrified Taraxia from this force. Planets are brought in as, quote, weapons of war. Though I confess, while the common assumption is that they're being thrown at Thanos, it just seems so, well, crude. Considering that it's their menacing potential that Thanos deals with, I'm inclined to think that they had something else in mind as far as a threat went rather than 10 trillion pound blunt objects, even considering that they are meant to be a distraction. Kronos tries to bury Thanos in time, yet fails. Chaos and Order try to dichotomize him, and Galactus, the Stranger, and Epic unify their energies to catch him off balance. But only for a moment. Love and hate try manipulating his emotions to break his mind, but he dispatches them. Infinite cosmic personifications are being bent low before the gems and Thanos' will. This, though, is when Thanos is most weakened, which is, of course, the moment that Mephisto has been waiting for, launching his own attack and attempting to steal away the Infinity Gauntlet. It fails, but while Mephisto writhes in his grip, Thanos takes a blast of dark energy in the ultimate betrayal, Mistress Death herself. She has now raised her hand against him. The unified forces try to burn Thanos down, and still he endures. Out of the conflagration, the immortal forces are imprisoned. Only the Watcher, Taraxia, and the shielded Eros and Nebula remain with him. As we've reached the top powers of the Marvel Universe, let's drop down to street level, to those that we passed along the way. From issue 3, the Black Widow is seen on the streets. The city has not only been hit by the snap, the Mad God's rage has left the place structurally weakened and burning. She goes into a burning building, finds a lone baby and a way out. But there's a woman hanging from the window, and the building collapses before the Black Widow can get to her. She did all she could, but as she despairs, all she has isn't good enough. Similarly, Moon Knight looks from a rooftop at a river on fire, a refinery rupturing, coating the surface and catching fire. An irony, Stained Glass Scarlet wanted to do this, and the hero managed to prevent it. But the fire is already here. There is nothing he can do but watch. These are indicative of the street-level heroes being impacted by events, and it is important that we stop and see what's happening, see it from their perspective, and see, most of all, what it is they're doing in this moment, what it is they're facing. They can only rise to the level of basic heroism in the wake of these cosmic events. It's not about saving the world for them. All they're trying to do is to save whoever they can, and along the way to not lose faith in the meaninglessness of doing a tiny amount of good in a sea of hopelessness. I mentioned we'd eventually get to Quasar, so that is what we will do now. During his big event, Quasar was forced to kill Eon, and in Quasar 26, Thanos laughs in delight that he has just learned about that through his power. He's delighted since Eon changed Captain Marvel, who then was able to thwart Thanos' machinations with the Cosmic Cube. He also erroneously says that he sent Drax after Thanos, but that was Kronos. Again, there's a lot of signs that there's not quite an understanding of the lore with this. Thanos crashes the funeral of Eon to gloat and gets in a fight with Quasar. And as I said in the last part, during the battle with the heroes, Thanos and Quasar address each other as if this didn't happen. These events happen beyond this book, though, although not in the pages of Infinity Gauntlet. Thanos turns Eon's corpse inside out so that it begins flowing into our dimension. He also creates doppelgangers of other wielders of the quantum bands to attack Quasar. I hate to seem like I'm harping on this, but Thanos simply doesn't feel like himself. He feels less like himself than the unofficial crossover issue of Spider-Man 17, and that wasn't even any good. Still, battling the former wielders of the bands, those who were notable in their strengths, forces him to confront his own lingering sense of inferiority. Eon died on his watch, and he may have saved the universe recently, but that's still not easy to shake. Having to face them is not all that different from what the Silver Surfer faced, the need to confront denial, doubt, and guilt. This is one of the perhaps underappreciated aspects of the Infinity Gauntlet event. It makes the character stop and look in the mirror. The Silver Surfer sees he has chosen to forget rather than forgive, and it has left him shackled, waiting until the opportunity to finally break beneath the weight of it. Dr. Doom looks at his weakness in the face of temptation and ambition, and is chastened at what that weakness may have cost the cosmos. The Hulk looks upon the abomination and sees his past and what he fears will be his future. Black Widow and Moon Knight are humbled in their helplessness, yet carry on to do what small things they can. What matters about the Infinity Gauntlet event is not that it's big, it's that it's small. The events are of power, warping time, warping space, warping reality, warping the mind. But the soul remains and is revealed. Let's detour over to the title Sleepwalker, a character created by Bob Budiansky, who was the writer on the Transformers for years and created many aspects of those characters. Sleepwalker is an alien from the mind dimension who has been sort of bonded with a human named Rick. Whenever Rick goes to sleep, Sleepwalker exists in our world. All well and good, except the human he's bonded with has just become a victim of the snap. So now Sleepwalker is trapped in our world and unable to return to his own dimension to regain his strength. In issue 7, he's accosted repeatedly by those who assume he must be responsible for all the disappearances, even Rick's parents when they come to his apartment and find him gone and this alien within. Despite the loss of half the population, a nearby chain gang does hard labor under the watch of guards, but when the blast of Thanos' anger hits our world and causes an earthquake, the 4 convicts knock out the guards and make their escape into an advanced energy facility. Another quake and the 4 are zapped, all gaining incredible powers. But once they take off their chains, the powers go away. The only way to keep these gifts is if they're willing to stay chained together. But elsewhere is the Sleepwalker, trying to do his part, such as catching a falling baby and rescuing people from compromised buildings. Until finally a shade appears to him, Dr. Strange. Having seen his heroism, Strange asks if he'll join a group of heroes dealing with the threat that Eon's corpse poses. So Sleepwalker joins in alongside the others, like Moon Knight, Deathlock, and Darkhawk. Skipping back over to Quasar 27, an eclectic set of heroes have all joined in to deal with Eon's remains. Even her recognizes that she needs to do more than just stand by while this is going on, and joins in, if only to stop the corpse from reaching Doctor Strange's home, where Warlock is organizing to oppose Thanos. Jack of Hearts, reconstituted last issue by Moondragon, arrives to help out. It's during this that Quasar finds Epic and brings the youth into being to avoid being stillborn. This appears to help slow the flood so that the heroes can work to clear the remains and save all that they can from this latest threat. However, back in Sleepwalker 7, the title character senses that even though this has been dealt with, there is another menace, and it's the Chain Gang. Sleepwalker is weakened, and united by their chains, they're so strong. It's fortunate, then, in this particular case, that while the dimensional distortions are causing terrible things to happen, one opening is to the mindscape, so the Sleepwalker drags them inside, where he regains his full strength. He easily dispatches them, but when he returns fully powered, it's still not enough to save those from a collapsing building. Let's return now to Infinity Gauntlet number 5, where Thanos has just locked up the cosmic beings, and Warlock and the Silver Surfer note that the effects of the conflict are finally abating. But in the aftermath, the Surfer is horrified to see a shattered world that he knew was inhabited, full of nothing but debris and corpses when he arrives to look for survivors. Yet despite this, Warlock insists they cannot stop, because this is what Thanos would do to the universe in time. And on that topic, Eternity arrives to now confront Thanos and regain control of this reality. Yet Warlock can already sense this is a confrontation that Thanos will win, and so it's time to return to Doctor Strange to plan for the final chance to save reality. Because as of now, Thanos is reality. Looking upon this scene, the Watcher concludes that hope for this plane of existence is now gone. It's all over. Thanos has ascended beyond the need for his body. But that's when the ace up Starlin's sleeve appears. As I mentioned in Part 6, Thanos torching Nebula could easily be presumed to be an act of spite, not uncommon when someone else has mucked around with your character. But as I said, Starlin was playing a longer game. What looked like simple cruelty for cruelty's sake is revealed to be Thanos placing the seed for his own destruction within reach. A move made just a few issues into his Silver Surfer run before Thanos even had taken his first Infinity Gem. Starlin has already laid the groundwork for the character's fall. This is a masterstroke of misdirection, the answer hiding in plain sight this whole time. Nebula, who for all the damage and torment she has suffered, still has a spark of herself within. The woman who had once wielded the power to treat the powerful stranger as merely a yapping dog to be kicked aside at a whim. A mind that has tasted the tiniest hint of omnipotence, and seized the opportunity before her to drink deeply from the cup this time. Nebula takes the gauntlet from Thanos' body, and with it all of his godhood. With but a thought, she restores her broken body to her full glory. But even as Nebula casts Thanos and his love into deep space, Warlock senses what has happened and says this is now worse. The chink in Thanos' armor was exploited by someone who would not only refuse to surrender the power to restore balance, but is a mind that has suffered long at Thanos' whims. And as for Taraxia, created despite death, is now claimed by death as she asphyxiates without Thanos' powers. I shall miss her, he thinks, and it's no surprise. In the end, she and she alone did not betray him, did not covet his power. And here, Thanos is left alone, the lover of death with a corpse for eternal company. The long list of those humbled must now include the mad god himself, now merely waiting out existence until true madness takes him.